My name is Donnacha Murphy from Mahon Architects, and we've been asked to speak on a LIFE project, which is the Cork University Hospital Adult Acute Mental Health Unit. I'm going to briefly introduce the project and hand over to Mark on the engineering side, and come back at the end and speak about it from an architect's point of view. I just thought it was quite interesting. Our chairman Tom spoke about when he graduated in the 70s and spoke about how technology has moved forward. I graduated in 2002, and the first office I worked on still used hand drawing, so it's certainly not a long time ago, and facsimile was still being used, so we are always in transition, and it's no different now. By way of introduction, Mahon Architects are primarily specialist in healthcare design with head offices in Dublin, offices in London, Cork and Limerick, and we have approximately 29 staff, and I head up the Cork office. In terms of Mahon's BIM projects, the Children's Hospital, which was mentioned by one of our, Paul Dufresne, our earlier speaker, the earlier version of the Matter site in 2009 was a BIM project. There seemed to be a little bit of a lull in incorporating BIM into other projects, but certainly in the last 12 months, 18 months, we've seen an awful lot of projects moving to BIM. The National Rehabilitation Hospital being one, the Mercer Institute, which Paul mentioned in St James's, and the acute mental health units, which we are going to focus on the Cork one today. There's one in Galway starting on site, and one in Killarney starting on site also. The adult acute mental health unit itself, I suppose where it came from was to replace an existing mental health unit on the Cork University campus dating from the 1970s, and the 2005 Mental Health Commission report and the document Vision for Change, I suppose, are looking at putting a better mental health facilities all over the country. The procurement was a 2010 HC Framework Agreement, Design and Build, a competitive tender, which ourselves, Mahon, were with Punch with BAM Buildings, and we won the competitive bid last year, and it was important to note it's based on exemplar design. The designs had achieved planning permission and fire cert and disability act cert at the time of our bid, and at that stage the project was not in BIM, so we were really certainly getting into the deep end. BAM were the drivers really to put the project on BIM as a kind of a kick-off or flagship project. Our own office in Cork hadn't used BIM as yet, and so we were literally in at the deep end. But I think it's an important message to get across to people that try and remove the fear factor, because design and build by nature can be quite frantic in any case. Adding in the BIM factor seemed to, I suppose, was a fear factor with that too, but with collaboration it needn't be a problem. A brief description of the project: it's a 50-bed, 2-storey facility over basement car park. It's ground floor containing 6 assessment beds, 36 inpatient beds, both male and female, and its first floor with 8 older person beds, therapy rooms and staff areas. It's primarily single suite ensuite bedrooms, single occupation ensuite bedrooms, and it has associated day rooms, etc. And it has a series of integrated landscape courtyards, and it's in the live campus, which some of the earlier slides showed. I suppose design and build and getting out of the ground, I suppose a key document that was brought into play by BAM and the design team had to buy into was a BIM execution plan. I won't go into it in any detail, but it is a framework document that is very important, so people know their roles. And I suppose from an early stage, as I mentioned, on design and build, it was about once you're appointed, you're getting out of the ground, and that's where I'll hand over to Punch, Mark McKenna from Punch, to describe the engineering aspects.
Thanks, Donnacha. So, just a brief introduction. Punch Consulting Engineers is a trading name of Michael Punch and Partners. We're in Ireland since '73. We've 83 staff, and we've got 3 offices in Ireland: Dublin, Limerick and Cork. So our primary civil, structural, environmental consulting engineering. So currently BIM projects we're working on is the COH, Adult Mental Health. It's design build, and it's GCC, design build, designed by contractor. The Burnell building is a GCC designed by employer, form of contract. Same with Galway is actually DB, designed by contractor, and NUI Minute, it was a GCC designed by the client. Just on Cork University, the actual project, as Donnacha mentioned, it was bid in 2D, designed in AutoCAD from an exemplar design. So as an element of value engineering and design went into it to actually make the bid competitive. And then once the bid was successful, BAM were the driver behind the use of, I suppose, Revit in our instance to deliver as part of the BIM development for it. So in this aspect of it, I suppose the basics of it is that the building consists of a 2-story load-bearing masonry structure with precast floors sited over a transfer slab, which is over a basement car park. So again, the 2D design was part of the bid, so you can see how the actual plans are generated and how the model is actually extrapolated from same. So as part of our design on this, we designed the temporary works as well, and it became quite clear from us using 3D technology and modelling that we were becoming a lot more efficient with regards to our design. We were avoiding clashes, and we were actually able to redesign what were contiguous piled walls and convert them to king posts. And modelling the temporary works effectively allowed us to actually see all the spatial relations around the building rather than just having a single 2D section and, I suppose, asking the contractor to figure it out himself on site. So it brought about clear advantages. So the permanent works from this, the basement, concrete retaining structure, water retaining. So it consisted of a 250 thick basement slab, and then all subfloor, substructure, internal drainage were all modelled within the building itself. So the model of civil and structural engineering elements, I suppose, they allowed for the coordination of the structure, giving a clear understanding of the intended construction sequence from the contractor's point of view. Just in the modelling design, it allows, I suppose, the engineers to actually input all the information with regards to the specifications of materials. So it's again, we're using Revit, we're actually only glossing on the surface of what the capabilities of software are, but it does allow from us, I suppose, to move much more quicker to get an understanding of how the building is going to develop from a design perspective. It also gives the engineer a good and a better understanding of how the contractor is actually going to go about building it. It's from the engineering analysis. It's the capabilities of the software that's allowing us. Revit is compatible with the basic software packages that we're using, so we can we can use 3D modeling, which we were always using, as the lads referred to, that we weren't actually handing over in the past. So the modeling always allowed the engineer to get a good understanding of the building. But now we have software that's compatible with Revit, so you can actually take a model and bring it in, or else use the model or use your analysis package and bring it back out into Revit. So it just gives you much more efficiencies, a lot more efficiencies in your design. From a coordination perspective, I suppose, in this building, I suppose it's not very complex now. It's load-bearing blockwork, precast floors on top of the transfer. So the biggest issue on this job was going to be the transfer structure and the precast. The precast was being fabricated off-site, so all builders' work had to be included. And the transfer structure was so thick, we had to make sure there was no cores going through it. So I suppose from this we allowed the modelling, and you can see from this just how the services actually were coordinated through. So there's huge emphasis on, I suppose, using software is actually the people that are working on it. If the people can't communicate, the whole thing is just going to fall asunder. That kind of leads to compatibility of it. I suppose we modelled everything on the job from steel to concrete, that we didn't do reinforcement. So we converted 2D plans into 3D, and then using them 3D designs, actually exported them back to 2D to send those drawings out to site. So just from an engineering perspective on the project itself, the biggest item that has to be considered at the start of every BIM project, or every project I suppose, is the communication and how it's actually going to be dealt with throughout the job. Compatibility, to make sure that, I suppose, there's a plan that everyone is actually working to the same sense, that everyone has an understanding of where the system, where the model is going. I suppose with design coordination is effectively, from the engineering perspective, you're getting an understanding of how your 2D drawings are actually going to be developed into, I suppose, 3D. So it shows all your dirty linen, for want of a better word. You can't avoid not detailing areas where you could traditionally hide with your 2D section. Clash detection brings about a huge amount, which means that there's a significant integration with the mechanical and electrical, especially in a hospital environment, which means that the M&E designers actually need to physically understand how they're actually fitting their components together to make sure that they can actually be integrated within the structure, rather than getting, I suppose, a barrage of builders' work when you're on site and leading to change orders and everything. So temporary works is a big thing, that it brings it about at an early stage in the job. It brings it into your model, and you can't hide from it. You need to identify it within your model. And likewise, for the reasons of, we'll say, take take it 50 or 100 years' time, at the end of the building life, if there's a demolition sequence, you'd need to know from the model how the engineer's ideas and thought process were put in. So at least there's an understanding to get, a demolition sequence back out of the model. So the other thing that became clear on this job is that there's a virtual world and there's a reality that if it's design build, that with modelling there's design time required, and I suppose making sure that contractors and consultants alike that who are getting into bed together with regards to the design build, that I suppose that it doesn't become a build design where your model is following faster because your contractor is building quicker. That you actually need to make sure that everyone is on board and that there's sufficient time, lead-in time, likewise with the stages of traditional or government procurement, that each of the stages they allow for the model development and the design, so it just doesn't become a waste of everyone's time. And I suppose complete design, effectively, it is 3D, we're using Revit to actually develop it. We're only broad brushing on the surface of it from a civil and structural point of view, but it does bring about complete designs in buildings. I'll hand you back to Donnacha there. He'll talk to you about the architectural aspect of the project. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm just going to focus briefly on using BIM from an architecture perspective on the CUH mental health unit, and I suppose the main points we're looking at, well, why BIM, and the tool of choice is Revit. And I suppose look at the power of BIM, and the power it gives the design teams, and also I think it empowers clients as well. I think our earlier speakers, both Michael Gallagher and Paul Brennan, spoke about that, about increasing the client's understanding of what they're going to get, because we do deal with large client teams, user groups, etc. And it was recently we did a walkthrough for a client on the CUH mental health building, and it's quite amazing. Client teams who've been involved in the early stages of the project, their sense of surprise at walking through the building, and they were still quite amazed that they didn't realise that, well, certain space were going to look in a certain way, even though they had been looking at 2D plans for quite a long time. It certainly is one of the key advantages I would see from us as architects, trying to get across to clients what we're actually creating for them. Also about design team collaboration, of course, the room data sheet I'm going to speak about, and clash detection just briefly. Again, why BIM, and Revit is the tool of choice. And I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, BIM and Revit, they're not the same thing, but Revit is a tool of choice on this project. I suppose in healthcare, large-scale projects demands inclusive design team work approach, and as mentioned by Tom, I suppose the hospital, in terms of complexity, can be extremely complex. So the power of BIM certainly is a huge advantage for healthcare projects. It has the benefits of preparing a fully integrated design that can be handed over to the contractor and eventually to the client. I suppose at the moment we're developing the safety file through BIM with a view to hand it over to the HSE. That's what we're developing at the moment. The multidisciplinary team can all feed and interrogate into one federated model. And I suppose the role of BIM managers and BIM coordinators are very important, and the BIM execution plan. It can support inputs from expert designers and fabricators across worldwide geographical locations. So we're seeing that suppliers and subcontractors, designers, fabricators are beginning to develop their components in BIM, and that can be obviously a huge advantage to us in design process. And of course, brief requirements, I suppose it is being rolled out by clients, the HSE, etc. But in this case, BAM was our client, and they drove the BIM agenda here. So the next couple of slides are just looking at the power of BIM, and this is an aerial view of the model. And really looking at almost the endless possibilities of interrogating the model. I suppose typically we would be, for tender packages, we would do a certain number of plans, sections, elevations, but as the project goes and you can really interrogate the project, it might only be for half an hour. You wouldn't have to slavishly draw a whole section just to look at one piece. You can interrogate the model, look at a piece of the building, make a decision, and move on. Yeah, client presentations and 3D visualizations, I think from an architect's point of view, it's so important that the clients understand, as I mentioned, what they're getting. And a simple example is, as I mentioned earlier on, the 2D plan and the development of the 3D plan, and getting clients to understand workflows. I mean, it's so important in getting sign-off from clients, but also that they understand what they're getting. And obviously when it comes to construction stage, much more difficult to make changes and more expensive as well. Another example of just presentations, and it was old skills and new skills. I was we speak about, like, we aren't throwing the baby out of the bathwater. We are still using some of our old skills as well. Sometimes you'll be developing sketches, etc., for interior design, but the two slides on the right do show very quickly we can develop interior design concepts. This is just a simple study showing a user group in the particular department, what colour accent wall they might have, the roof light, etc. Just a particular corner of the building, which it didn't take long to develop, and it gave a client a much better understanding of what they were getting. Again, collaboration with, of course, non-BIM users as well. Plus, we have landscape architects on board, Mitchells, who weren't using BIM per se, but we were able to collaborate with them and develop the design of the courtyards by producing lots of screen grabs, shots for them, in order for them to produce some of their landscape freehand sketches, which it's not a dying art really. It can still be used. Clients still like it, as well as a softness about it. But I think BIM can be used to enhance this and give it more power per se. A worked example, a very benign example would seem, this is actually an exemplar roof plan done by Ready Architecture and Urbanism, which shows a series of the circular items are a series of roof lights, which again look like benign items, but at an early stage, we're able to interrogate what these roof lights would actually be, and the selection of roof light, the size of it, etc. And that's a screenshot from one of our service coordinator meetings, where you see an electrical tray going through a roof light, which often we've arrived on site where this would still be the case, but of course we're able to interrogate that, and it actually informed the type of roof light. We actually changed to a longer, thinner roof light, which in my opinion gave a better spread of light as well. It was actually a Velux product, which is it gave a 3 meters long by 700 millimeter roof light, which gave I think a better internal light to the client, but also allowed the services, the corridors with heavy services, them to function, because services in the main were not allowed in the patient's rooms for risk reasons, etc. The component itself is actually, as I mentioned, as a Velux roof light. It's actually a Revit family, which we were able to import into our model and use it to develop the design. Things like 1 to 5 details. I mean, this is a focus on an external canopy. We are not doing 1 to 5 details on Revit in this particular project, but we were able to enhance, I suppose, our how we get an idea across to a client and their technical advisory team, or not just the build-up of a particular canopy, but also supplement it with some 3D images, etc. I suppose the room data sheet is something that in healthcare is probably the nuts and bolts, the bread and butter of every project. And this is a typical room data sheet. Looks no different to a normal one, I suppose, that in a non-BIM environment. It's of a bedroom, of one of the bedrooms, single bedrooms, and on the right you see a schedule of services. And a bedroom per se would not be considered a complex space, but still each outlet is actually scheduled in BIM. And I suppose key for coordination, if, for example, a client wanted to add a socket or take away a socket, it's not just a matter of, it is just a matter of changing one drawing. It disappears from the schedule, but also it can be collaborated with the M&E subcontractors and engineers in a very streamlined way. As I said, the room data sheet is not just now a 2D drawing. Behind that is the service collaboration, which is so important, that the 2D data sheet doesn't just get shelved. It in fact is a very active document in ensuring that the services are where they're supposed to be. What we're developing now also in the room data sheet, I suppose it's like an added value. It's obviously the 2D elevations are still a part of the schedule, but adding a 3D perspective for each room, I suppose, is something we're looking at developing, and it gives the clients a great understanding of what each space is going to look like. Reflected ceiling plans is another, I suppose, bugbear. Plus, in healthcare design, it can be so complex and something that can go, I suppose, go awry quite easily. But developing it in BIM and through Revit with the other design team members, there's an excellent collaboration, and it really de-risks us from the contractor's point of view in terms of getting it right and getting it signed off and get everything in place. Again, design team collaboration. I suppose I just picked, there's probably endless examples, but I think, again, this is a complex looking slide, but I suppose the power of BIM, it can be used in lots of ways, in that this particular way, we just were able to filter down a clash for rainwater versus a sprinkler system. We were designing the rainwater. There was a specialist sprinkler designer, and we were able to highlight clashes specific to those disciplines, rather than getting bogged down in every clash in the building, because you would get bogged down very quickly. And that was used through Navisworks Manage. And there's also an excellent piece of software which is called BIM Glue 360, which is a lighter form, I suppose, so it can allow the contractors and the design team leaders to really interrogate the models quite quickly and easily, and on site as well also. I suppose what's important to note is getting information to site. I suppose 2D drawings are still required because, as we mentioned earlier on, all the industry isn't using BIM, and they still need to record drawing issues, etc. And that should be all in the BIM execution plan as well. But what we are seeing on site, and on the slide at the moment, you will see some of the BAM operatives using their iPads. They would have room data sheets that they can do a virtual walkthrough, walk into a room and say, well, the service isn't in the right place, and it's meant to be here. So there is actually on the ground where it's not just sitting in the office with the site engineer, they're actually going onto the ground there and delivering the project as designed. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Michael Murphy from a construction point of view.
Thanks, Donnacha. Good morning, everybody. I'll be as brief as I can. Okay, so I'm here to talk, obviously, about the CUH project. Current healthcare BIM projects that BAM are implementing at the moment would be the Ulster Hospital, CUH, Galway University Hospital, Killarney, and St James's Hospital. So we're quite active in the healthcare sector. CUH, Design and Build Project. I don't think I need to go through all of this in greater detail. I think you've all heard what this is all about. So BIM is obviously being used. It's been implemented throughout the entire delivery of the building. Obviously, as the lads mentioned, it wasn't initially designed as a BIM project. It is design and build. So a very, very high pressure environment in terms of bringing BIM to the project. So that certainly wasn't easy. As Donnacha mentioned, design and builds are intense in any event. So it's extremely important for us to map our process flows. We understand that we need to do this. BAM aim to be a lean entity, and obviously the best way to do that is to document what we do and constantly review our processes as we go. So it helps us with our root cause analysis. When we have issues on site, we have issues in communication, we know which way we can work our way back, and try and identify quickly where we're having these problems. We manage the process on the site. That's the famous BIM execution plan that Donnacha was alluding to. It's a live document. It's never ending. Things are constantly changing in it. It is managed by our coordinators on the site. But as well as that, we have plenty of other processes and workflows that we would implement on the actual project itself. Action registers. All of these documents are appendices to our BIM execution plan. With a very, very high level of visibility on the metrics being collected. These models and the process in general is giving us a great level of information we would normally not get back. We're obviously leveraging tools such as WebEx, Skype, and Link. Very, very important tools. Again, it's all part of the big change in the industry right now. We're trying to be lean. So an example of that would be maybe every second week we would meet by WebEx instead of pulling everybody together. People are very busy, so we try to keep them at their desks, reduce our carbon footprint. The authoring tool itself, obviously the tool of choice was Revit. BAM are an enterprise customer of Autodesk, so naturally enough we would be aligned with their products. Revit is a superb tool from a design authoring point of view. An example there was very, very quickly identified that we were going to have issues with this building in terms of the roof lights. So I think within the second week this had been identified and it was immediately addressed by our design team. So again, mitigating the risk. Again, more examples of documenting processes for our coordinators and for our design team members. So if people are having to run clash detection or perform a particular function that we would request of them, we will provide them with the guidance. We would also provide them with training if needs be. It's extremely important for us that we support our designers. Navisworks Manage is the tool of choice for managing the BIM federated model, Okay, so all of our designs would have been authored through Revit, federated with Navisworks, and everybody would have, gone to the single source of truth, which was the federated model. So all of our issues, all of our clashes, all of our communications on the model would have been conducted through Navisworks. We have access to BIM 360 Glue. It is live on 3 projects for us at the moment, one of which is Cork University Hospital. We are leveraging it for the M&E install phase. It's particularly applicable there. Our BAM specialist division, BAM services, are using this to kind of verify the install. And uniquely enough, it is bringing huge benefits to us. We can install our containment very early because we know, having coordinated with our soils and waste, with our sprinkler, that this is going to work. Traditionally, the sequencing of those types of work would be difficult for us. We would have to wait, and it's first past the line tends to get their service in, but we can live with a degree of confidence. We can keep subcontractors on sites throughout and get a full install complete and let them go instead of having to bring them back when the soils and waste is complete or whatever the case might be. So again, just enabling a lean process for BAM, highly beneficial for us. Metrics, huge amount of data comes back. Okay, all of our communication is very quick through these products. They capture a lot of data. So that's something which is traditionally extremely difficult to do. It's possible, but it's difficult to do. So the contractor in the field, things are changing for us by the week, I would suggest. How we conduct our business on a site is dramatically changing. The way our site offices are set up, the way our engineers are decked out, all completely different now. Everybody is kind of live and hooked up through their iPads. We have to have, projectors or television screens within our site offices to allow us to conduct design coordination meetings. So the Glue product, super product, it's available as a mobile app. It's also a virtualized product, so that means when you invite somebody onto a Glue project, it virtualizes the software on the desktop. So all they need is an internet connection, effectively. So Navisworks is an expensive tool, but you can provide somebody access to Navisworks through their own desktop. What you see there is the mobile app, so you can see our site. On the right-hand side, we have the ability to turn on or off our models, so you can look at different things within context. You can just see particular systems versus the structure or whatever the case might be. Obviously, from a communications point of view, it's incredibly powerful. You can mark items up live in the field, and you can send a notification as you're standing there. So you don't have to return back to your site hut, send an email. The person receives an immediate email, and they can address it on their own iPad. They could be on the 3rd floor, and you can talk to each other and communicate in that sense. Fully auditable, documented history of everything that's gone on the project as well. So we can go back and look at issues we had 6 months previous and see how they're currently getting on. So you can see our horizontal services were modelling included as well. Punch did a superb job with this, and again, it identified a lot of issues that we would have had with this site, and it flavoured our approach to the actual construction of the building. Here's just a couple of images, might not be great quality. The building going up. So it's moving along nicely. It's a busy site when you're there. Good buzz about it, It's an active building site. Okay. So again, more processes. Our ICT infrastructure. It's extremely important for us that we document this, particularly with internally. ICT is a huge part of what we do through BIM. Our communications are now more important than ever. Just want to briefly talk about the M&E install and a couple of important workflows. So BAM services, on their particular model, they would have used Revit and Navisworks, and they would have used them simultaneously to allow them to coordinate their work. It can be very difficult within Revit to coordinate your work as you go. Sometimes, unless you have a very powerful machine, it can be slow. Whereas Navisworks is specifically designed for that. So as you hit refresh on your right-hand screen on Navisworks, you will see what's current from your Revit model. So they're important workflows for people to understand as well. So it allows us to look at single rooms and pods. So we don't have to replicate our effort 50 times. We just do one room and we can copy it around as well. So those principles are important. These tools are designed, and they are just tools. They're designed to aid you. Again, allowing us to coordinate our rooms, giving us certainty and mitigating risk. The plant rooms, spatial awareness, spatial coordination can all be done very early on. So we can identify with our designers if we're going to have enough space in the plant room, if we need to increase, decrease, whatever the case might be. Shining example of back to the roof lights. Obviously, we dealt with it. As Donnacha mentioned, you cannot run the services within the bedrooms, within these types of buildings. They have to be in the corridors. So it was a challenge there. But we met that challenge, and the install is ongoing at the moment. But we could very well have procured those roof lights that we originally seen had we not done this, because that's just the nature of construction at the moment. You know, these are the things, the items that this is allowing us to address early on. BAM Services, highly active with our designers as well in terms of communicating issues that they will have with their own model. Super tools for that. So again, not everything went perfectly. There was the odd issue, but that's just the nature of the beast. As was mentioned by Donnacha and Mark, we are planning to provide the HSE with an O&M manual through the model as well. So we have engaged with HSE estates in the south in relation to this, and this is something BAM are going to provide as a value add. You know, it's a learning curve for ourselves as well, but we feel it is important for us to push ourselves in this direction and look at the issues around this type of delivery through BIM. But there is huge value in this. Navigating these models, you click an item, it'll bring you to a secure website, and it gives you the data sheet on that particular item. And ultimately for our client, that's where they want to be. And we appreciate and understand that. There are challenges around it, but we are working very hard to make sure we tick those boxes. Just briefly mentioning another project, and I want to make a mention of Leica and John. They helped us out with our laser scanning here. Superb job. These are other value adds that can be brought into BIM. So this is the Mercer building. You can see the existing scan there on the left-hand side. This has allowed us to identify quite early on within this building potential issues we have with our design. So we had a very high-level building information model, a massing, shall we say, of the exemplar design in our buildings. But we made the decision that we were going to go and scan this for certainty, okay? So I'm just going to play a very brief video. Bear with me while I do. I just want to show you one example of something that we found quite early on within the first day of bringing the scan and the actual, oh, you guys can't see that. My apologies. Now, that's better. Okay. Let me play here. So on the left-hand side is the new building, on the right-hand side is the scan. And it was immediately obvious to us that the balconies directly above our head at the moment were going to collide with the existing H&H block. That unfortunately might have been an issue that may have been spotted way too late. On the original survey data that we were provided by the client, that building wasn't that close, but in reality, it's far closer. So our design team are working quite hard at the moment to deal with this and to reconcile it. So architecturally, it's colliding by about 300 mil. Now, we could be well out of the ground by the time we spot that issue, and there's a cost there for us. So, you know, whatever cost is associated with us with taking this type of data in, clearly it's not a cost, it's a huge investment. And the main reason we actually chose this particular site, and I'm just going to drive this on quite quickly here, was that there was an existing underground car park on this site as well. And on the original record drawings, it was quite clear that they were an unverified location of the car park. So we felt we needed to identify with certainty where this is, because we're proposing a building over the top of the existing car park. So through the scan, we're able to identify exactly where this car park is and exactly where our proposing building sits above it. Again, mitigating risk, health and safety, all the type of stuff that we absolutely should be doing. So you can see the building sitting over the top of the car park there. It is a huge amount of data. I mean, I'm talking massive, massive data. There was about 16 gigabytes of data just for that scan alone. So super technology, and this is the type of stuff that we're looking to leverage at the moment ourselves. Stop that. Let me find my mouse. Okay. So, if it is not controlled and planned, BIM implementation can leave you feeling and possibly even looking like this guy. It's really important. You have to execute a plan. Okay, I cannot stress that. A competent person needs to know what they're doing with this technology. It can go disastrously wrong if that is not the case. Okay. So what is BIM to the Irish construction industry? I was at BIM Show Live last week, and somebody mentioned the word renaissance. So it certainly is a renaissance. It is an industry reborn through technology, okay? And that is the way the industry is certainly moving at the moment. It's a positive word, right? Things are heading in the right direction through the use and leveraging of this technology. You've heard a couple of words here today: collaboration, communication. I think the most important one there is cooperation. You can collaborate against people. We want to foster that within our own design and build teams. We know that BAM don't purport to know everything. We constantly want to learn, and we feel that's extremely important. And, you know, we don't claim to be experts in this, but we want to work with experts. We want to work with people who can guide us in the right direction as well. We are quite prepared to listen. So on that, thank you very much.